So I'm Bryan Rosensteel. I am the PubSec PMM for Wiz. And if we get the presentation up on the main screen, perfect. What we're going to be talking about today is ways that we really feel you can accelerate your CMMC adoption through something called CNAPP, which is Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. Really what I want to talk about today are things that you can be doing to help out with compliance, or if you're on the side where you're an assessor, things that you might be able to recommendation to someone who's trying to figure out, how do I understand the state of my environment? Where we'll start with this, right, we know final ruling from the DoD came out. A lot of us have probably either read that final ruling or at least familiar with it. I think something that's really important is to understand the mission goals of CMMC. A lot of times we're very quick to go in and say, well, what is it that I'm supposed to do? What controls do I have to follow? But you don't understand what it is that we're trying to achieve with it. So some of these will be review, but for others, it may be some of the first times if you're new to CMMC. And I like these, right? Safeguarding sensitive information for enabling, protecting warfighter, enforcing cybersecurity standards to meet evolving threats, ensuring accountability while minimizing the barriers to compliance. I think that one's really important. We need to make sure that we have not just security in place, but that we have a way to account that that security is being done, but in a way that isn't a barrier. Compliance gets a bad rap. A lot of times people say, oh, it's just checkbox. It gets in the way of security. And in the past, in the way it gets implemented, maybe that's true. But they're trying to get it to where that isn't the case. Instead, it's baked in. And then the next one really kind of talks to that. Perpetuating a collaborative culture of cybersecurity and cyber resilience. That cultural barrier in order to be able to understand security isn't just within a single team. It's not just for a checkbox. It's not just so that I can sell to the government or get that contract and bid on it. But it's something that works throughout the organization, that we all kind of understand that collective mission. And that's what's going to allow us to have that public trust and high standards. Because the reality is, especially when we look at the scope of the audience for CMMC, we're talking about national security. We're talking about if we don't get it correct, the end result is something that is very detrimental on a global scale. So we get to go into how do we achieve CMMC. We have 3 different levels across 4 different categories that math works somehow. But we look at, okay, what do I need to do as an organization? Level 1, self-assessment, 15 security requirements, right? We're probably pretty familiar with this at this point. Level 2, whether it's the self-assessment or the C3PAO, I'm doing 110 security requirements based on NIST 171, revision 2. Or if I'm in level 3, I'm adding in an additional 24 controls to give me 134 total. And while, from a Wiz perspective, we could tell you how you can meet, from 171, revision 2, the 110 controls, and we can go through those controls or how we can help you with that assessment. What I'd rather focus on is anytime you see a list of compliance controls is to focus on why those controls exist in the first place. What are the themes behind them, right? Because if you can understand that and build your cybersecurity posture around meeting those themes, the compliance comes along for the ride. So when we look at level 1, it's basic cybersecurity that's been hounded for years. Limit physical, logical access, limit your exposure, internal and external. When we get up to level 2, it starts getting a lot more prescriptive. Systemic visibility. Understanding what is deployed, where it's deployed, being able to have accurate reporting on it, being able to follow that least privileged as well as this actionable remediation. And I really like that, actionable remediation. Being able to have something where we have a process and procedure in place that when we notice misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, we have a way to remediate it in a way that scales and is effective. Right? If you can do that well, many of those 110 controls are going to come along with it. When we get to level 3, we understand we're humans. Humans make errors. I used to be a system engineer in the government. I made all kinds of errors, and fortunately, we had multi-party control so that someone else could figure out what I did wrong. But that's the kind of idea at level 3. Let's try to reduce that human error, bring in automation, multi-party control, and enhance training across the organization. However, there has always been a barrier anytime we've ever had a compliance or security initiative, especially in the government. And this is true elsewhere. The reality is that the pace of innovation, the pace of growth, the pace of deployment has always outperformed, always eclipsed the capacity of our security team. We're lucky if we can get our security team capacity to grow in a linear scale. But innovation is growing on an exponential scale. So what does that actually mean for our organization? Well, what it means is, in general, the security teams tend to push back anytime you try to give them more work. I do a lot of cycling. There's a famous kind of like joke in cycling. It comes from Bontrager, who developed cycling parts, and he would say you can have it light, you can have it strong, or you could have it cheap. Pick two. In security, as we try to deploy out cybersecurity, I think a lot of people would argue you can have compliance, you can have it secure, or you can deliver it very, very fast. Pick one. It's a little bit worse in this realm. The reality is we've got to move away from this mindset. We've got to move away from this mantra, and we've got to figure out how is it that we can hit all three of these, because all three are required on today's scale. We have to be able to deploy quickly, we have to be able to deploy quickly and have it secure, and we have to have accountability for that security so that we understand the very nature of how these things are being protected. So how do we do it? Well, this should be of no surprise to anyone. From a best practice, defense in depth strategy. But that defense in depth strategy really needs to be built on visibility and context, right? So when you look at a system where you start with an understanding of what is deployed, where it's deployed, how it's connected, all of a sudden you can use that to enable your prevention. You can use that to enable much stronger in-depth detection and being able to have a much swifter response that is going to be more meaningful across your different teams. How we feel that should be done is something that has emerged called CNAPP. Now, this is Gartner's definition of CNAPP, Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. And what Gartner has said is you need to take what were previously point solutions, right? Like cloud security posture management or container security posture management. That's your CSPM and your KSPM up there. Or your CEM, which is cloud infrastructure entitlement management. That's kind of like identity up within your cloud infrastructure. CWP, cloud workload protections. These have been around. They're not new. But they were point solutions previously, and Gartner's saying these need to be integrated together in an end-to-end cloud-native security solution that combines the different visibility and context from each to allow you to have a better understanding of the risk profile across your cloud environment. Now, from this, from a Wiz perspective, we kind of think Gartner hasn't gone far enough. In fact, we've told Gartner, hey, that is too narrow of a focus. When you look at CNAPP and you want to get that visibility with context, you need to bring in things where you're scanning for secrets. You need to bring in things where you're doing vulnerability and exposure management. You need something where you've got your data security posture management. Understand what sensitive data is out there, where that sensitive data resides. You need to be doing this not only for traditional components, you need to be doing it for AI as well. We need to know when you're deploying new AI to be able to build on-demand SBOMs and AI bombs and understand where those AI engines are, what they connect to, and be able to make that something that you can access not just within your security team, but across your organization. So how does a CNAPP work? Why is it something that we feel so passionate towards, and why can it help with things like CMMC? So this is kind of a really high-level view of CNAPP. What we would do is we go in over cloud-native APIs. This is an agentless approach. We start in the top down, go over connect on APIs, and then start understanding what is deployed in the environment. Put that into a graph database that allows us to understand the context of how things connect together. Some really interesting things start happening when you take that approach. Now, granted, I said going at it from an agentless standpoint because historically, in the past, we've gone about it from agents. Go in, get as much information as I can by deploying the agent. I'm not saying that an agent base can't work, but I'm telling you, you have to have visibility and context over what is deployed and where, so you know where to put the agents. And if I'm trying to get that visibility with context through the system, then I need visibility, and you see I'm in a catch-22. So by going in on the top-down level first and understanding the components, it allows me to know where I need to drill in if I do need to deploy an agent later on. So what have we done here? Well, we've gone through and we've learned a bunch of information. We figured out where your serverless, your containers, your VMs, where your infrastructure is. We started to understand how that relates together. And we start seeing things that you otherwise can't see if you're only looking at individual components. My example here, I've got a virtual machine. That virtual machine is connected to a database. That database we know because we scan that VM, we see that configuration. We see that there's an admin credential also connected to that VM. Again, we know that, right? Traditional scanning is able to tease all that information out. Here's where things start differing when you go down this approach built for the cloud. We understand that admin credential has a connection to a different database. There's no way that I'm scanning directly that VM and understanding that broader connection. The reality is my VM does not connect to one database as is configured, but through the broader lateral reach connects to two. After we've scanned this information, we're also looking for other things. We're looking for misconfigurations. We're looking for exposed secrets, critical vulnerabilities, malware that's present, excessive admin permissions, and where sensitive data resides. And now we suddenly have a very different situation going on than we thought before. That virtual machine that we're talking about that's connected over to that database, we know that has a critical vulnerability on it. And it's not just any critical vulnerability. We know it's a KEV, known exploitable vulnerability. That KEV, the way that it is able to be exploited, is over a network pathway. Well, we know this VM has external access. Now, the good news is the direct database that it's connected to doesn't contain any sensitive information. So you could look at this and say, yep, it's an issue, we need to remediate it, but that direct database doesn't expose anything. However, because we have broader context, we understand the admin credential, which, oh, by the way, like most admin credentials, unfortunately, has excess access permissions, which we're able to tease out by actually understanding what is that admin credential entitled for and what is it actually being used for to understand how to tighten it down from least privileged. We know that admin credential has access to that other database. And what's in that database? In this case, PII information. So now I have mapped out an attack pathway for an exploitable pathway to allow lateral movement across my organization to gain access to sensitive data. That, for us, is a critical issue. So when you look at things like what CMMC is trying to do with prioritization, when you look at the RMF from NIST and understanding, okay, in the risk management framework, it's not about CVE whack-a-mole. It's about understanding and prioritizing risk and responding accordingly. So if you start from this context, those different compliance frameworks start becoming a lot easier to be able to meet. And you're not building security just for those 110 controls, but you're building security that can be able to be used across multiple different frameworks itself. This is a different view of what I just talked about, right? So being able to actually scan, understand what's in the environment, be able to prioritize that remediation. And now this is where things get really fun. You can start taking that core graph database and start making it available to other teams across the different environments. Let's make sure that we can scan that within code for our DevOps, put guardrails on our DevOps environments. Let's make it something that we understand, hey, I've got the telemetry information. I'm looking at what's going on in the CloudTrail logs. I'm looking at what's going on in the identity. I'm looking at what's going on in the S3 buckets. I'm looking at what's going on within those containers and those clusters. These seemingly unrelated events are not unrelated. They're actually a hallmark of a threat actor coming in. This isn't something where we're worried about this being a potential risk. This is a breach. And we're able to then help you to detect that and then be able to have your SOC team remediate accordingly. Now, this wouldn't be a presentation in 2024 if I did not somehow manage to shoehorn in Zero Trust. I have. That allows me to be up on main stage. But the reality is, OK, let's look at what Zero Trust is trying to do. What is Zero Trust trying to get me? Visibility into the environment, being able to prioritize those risks, being able to verify what is deployed and how it's being used. Should sound very similar. When we go back to the intent of CMMC, some of those elements are within there. So I'm able to get that unconditional visibility. I'm able to do that across security baselines. I'm able to build this around a single central policy or policies that can be injected across different teams. One of the biggest barriers, whether it's CMMC, whether it's zero trust, whether it's other compliance frameworks in the past that have either been successful or failed, is always around the culture. And so being able to what we call democratize security, make it so that as a developer in my developer environment, I can have access to the same security posture that security team is going to scan my project after I go ahead and commit it. But I can do that while I'm actually developing it. That allows me to develop a whole lot faster, right? Or allows me to give that same information over to the SOC team so they're seeing what your cloud security team is seeing. One of the things that we're really proud of at Wiz is that more than 50% of our users fall outside the traditional security team. It's how we know that we're democratizing security correctly, by building it from that framework of visibility that's easily digestible across the organization in the type of environment where they're used to being able to operate. So another framework that's out there, Cloud Security Maturity Framework, should look very familiar. This is why I say not focusing on the individual controls. They're important. But understanding the intent of the controls gives you something that you can rinse and repeat across different maturity frameworks. When we look at this, gain visibility. How many controls within 171 talk about having accountable visibility within the environment? In the Cloud Security Maturity Framework, they want you to have that visibility across not just one cloud environment, but across your multi-cloud environments. The reality is, unfortunately, we're seeing, because of the stress of our dev teams, they're having to develop for both AWS and Azure and GCP, and they have to develop so quickly, they might have keys get slipped out into these environments, or maybe they have an AWS secret key, and this gets deployed in Azure. Well, the native tooling of Azure isn't designed to understand the misconfigurations against AWS, but your threat actors do. And so we are seeing cross-CSP, cross-platform, cross-cloud environment attacks. So having something that has that visibility across the multi-cloud allows you to understand that risk of not just lateral spread within an organization, but across your infrastructure. Gets into the reducing the critical risk. We talked about the democratizing security, developing securely, having those guardrails in place, being able to have hardened repositories and pipelines, and then being able to respond to threats based on the information that we're getting out of that visibility. Now, if those last three sound very familiar, then you might be familiar with some of these terms. Continuous monitoring, or CONMON, secure software supply chain, SSSC, ACD, active cyber defense. This is CATO. This is now the fourth framework that we can actually look at and be able to assist with based upon the same best kind of security practices. These are not three separate systems. Continuous monitoring is not a separate, it's usually done by a separate team, but it's not necessarily a separate tool set required to achieve versus our secure software supply chain versus what we can do in active cyber defense. If we start with that secure, that complete visibility with context, we now can have that to where, oh, I'm in my cloud environment, I can see there's a misconfiguration, I know it was checked into this code repository, I know this developer actually put it in, let me put in that pull request, let me send it over to them, and when they see it, they can scan and understand, oh, I'm being hit on this because it's this misconfiguration that's going against this CIS benchmark. And I understand it's in this particular line of my code for remediation. That's the kind of power that you can do when you start with that context and visibility. Now, ultimately, how this flywheel is supposed to work and what we want to get towards is you start with, securely by design with guardrails at that code level to prevent misconfigurations from being deployed in the first place. Once you're in production, you get proactive and look for anything that's slipped through the cracks or new and emerging threats that come up and say, oh, yeah, we know there's this new vulnerability. We can kick that back to code. So we went code to cloud, now we're going cloud back to code. And then we also have kind of that watchdog part of our organization, our SOC team, getting all of this high fidelity telemetry information coming in, and being able to understand when we're seeing, advanced persistent threat, type of thumbprint, and understanding, okay, I think I'm under an attack. It involves this part of my infrastructure. I know the potential blast radius because I know how things connect together. I can do a very quick root cause analysis, and I understand the kill chain because I know the threat of lateral spread and where they're going to try to move through the environment. Be able to respond very, very quickly. And that's what hopefully helps drive this entire security flywheel. So a little bit of shameless plug for Wiz, right? We are an authorized, FedRAMP authorized. We're actually the first CNAP platform to get authorized when you look at Gartner's definition. But one of the things that I'm really proud of, yeah, we can help with ITAR and HIPAA and CMMC, but we are one of the first 6 initial cloud service offerings to be testing the Agile Significant Change Request for FedRAMP modernization. I like to think one of the reasons why that's the case is that we are customer number 1 of our own environment. We know the importance of visibility with context, and so we are consuming our own CNAP to drive our FedRAMP offering. So we get FedRAMP authorization at the end of August. By the end of September, we have our first significant change request through the system, and we're bringing in a major component. I'm not going to announce it here, but at the Forrester event next month, early next month, we'll be announcing the next major addition into our FedRAMP moderate product that we're bringing in. And we have plans to continue that rapid pace of innovation where we're bringing in capabilities that are in a commercial product, not 6 or 12 months later, but 1 or 2 months later after they get announced and deployed within commercial. And we're able to do that because we can very quickly identify, hey, what is the impact of this new tool, of these new features within the environment, and what do we need to be able to document? We don't have to do that guesswork, and it's something that we can hand over to the FedRAMP PMO office, and it seems to be working well. This is our platform. A lot of what we talked about today, you will see up here within this is what is FedRAMP. Everything is available within commercial. This is what's available in FedRAMP as it is today. Those 2 gray areas will be disappearing very soon, wink, wink, hint, hint. But we have this ability of doing the cloud security posture management, container security, whether that be serverless or with actually Docker and Kubernetes, what we can do for secret scanning, what we can help you out with the supply chain risk assessments. And we have worked with organizations who have used us for not only their FedRAMP accreditation, but also for CMMC. They have been very successful. And it hasn't, again, been about necessarily chasing the controls, although ultimately they have to be accountable for every control. It's because they started with that framework that we talked about that allows them, when they go in and they read, okay, SC11 means I need to do this. Okay, well, I am starting from this framework, and very quickly I can figure out what I need to document to meet that particular control. If you are curious more about Wiz and you don't want to just hear about the theoretical but actually see the platform, we do have a tabletop. Like I said, and Ron's here as well, where we have kind of that listing of the different controls that we can help you to meet. But more importantly, we can also give you a demo and walkthrough of the product. I think I have maybe 5 minutes. So if there is 1 or 2 questions, I can take them. But if not, also, I'll thank you for your time. And I also understand we're all eating lunch as well, so I won't hold it against you if right now you're preoccupied doing other things. All right, thank you.
All righty, you guys can hear me. Okay, great. So I think I may have a presentation. If not, then for the next 15 minutes, you can just stare at me, and I'll stare back at you awkwardly and just talk. But my name is Brayden Fortino. I manage our aerospace and defense and federal system integrator business at Zscaler. So if you are unfamiliar with Zscaler, essentially what we are is we are a cloud-delivered zero trust solution. So as a sales guy, I know that every time I say zero trust, a butterfly loses its wings somewhere. But that is essentially what we are doing. And we are focusing on putting policy enforcement and inspection to the user in the data. And the way that we do this is, if you think about the way that a international airport operates, it's very similar to the way that Zscaler operates. So what we do first and foremost is we say, who are you? So similar to when you were going to an international airport, you were going to show them your ID, and they are going to say, hey, Brayden is who he says he is. Where is Brayden going? Does Brayden have authorization to go to that destination? And that is exactly what Zscaler is doing. We are saying, who are you? What policies do you have or do we have in place that designate where and what you can access? The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple different posture checks, right? Where are you? Where are you what device are you connecting from? What network are you on? Right? Same thing as an airport, right? When you go through the TSA, you need to show them your ID, you need to show them your boarding pass, right? And then you're going to go through the full inspection of TSA. You take off your jacket, your belt, your shoes, everything out of your pockets. So we're going to say, okay, is this a corporate managed device or is this a personal device? And I think there is my slide deck. Okay, I do not know how, oh, there we go, perfect. So we'll get through all of this. So again, we're going to go through a couple of different posture checks. We're going to say, who are you? Where, I'll go ahead and build this out. What are you accessing, right? What application are you accessing? Where are you going to your destination? Is it a SaaS application? Is it going through the open internet? Or is it a private application hosted in Azure, AWS, or your data center, right? And at that point, once we go through those different posture checks, this is where the traffic will be forwarded to Zscaler, and really what our bread and butter, what happens is we're going to do full break and inspect on that traffic. So again, back to the airport analogy, you're going to be going through TSA and they're going to be scanning your bags to make sure that you're not bringing anything malicious to your destination. And this is essentially what we're doing. And the way that we're going to be doing this is through a process that we call single scan multi-action. So all of our engines, our URL, our DLP, content filtering, sandboxing, they all have dedicated compute resources in our cloud infrastructure, and we're able to fire off those engines simultaneously in one pass. And we are doing SSL inspection on all of our traffic. And so at that point, we're going to make a decision, right? We're going to say, what is the action that we need to take on this traffic? And then we're going to forward you to that destination. And again, we're doing this regardless of where the user is located. What we've seen is there's a lot of distributed users across organizations. Some of these users may be remote. Some of these users may be in different office locations. Essentially, we're transforming some of these branch locations and headquarters to a Starbucks infrastructure to where Zscaler is being the secure transport layer to the internet and to the destination, regardless of where that destination is. So there's a couple core products within our platform that I'll essentially be talking about. But the three core products are going to be Zscaler Internet Access, Zscaler Private Access, and then Digital Experience Monitoring. And so what Internet Access is you can think about this very simply, is that we are being the secure layer on top of the internet. Use the internet as your transport layer, right? We're not really in the business of bandwidth. We are literally taking you from point A to point B, and we're doing that securely. And in a true proxy format, when your users are going to your destination, we're scanning every part of that website to make sure that there's nothing malicious hiding in any banner ads. We even have certain capabilities where we are able to publish potentially newly registered domains via a pixelated browser, right? And this is kind of where, when you see over there on the left-hand right-hand side, is that a lot of what we're doing is we're providing the secure, the full security, outbound security stack as a service. And so a lot of organizations have found value in being able to reduce certain point products and certain infrastructure, right? Wiz kind of talked about Gartner is really leading towards a holistic platform, right? Reducing the need for different point products, different administrative consoles, policies existing in different areas, and putting this into one platform. And when we think about Zscaler Internet Access, we really are looking at the entire outbound security stack and giving that to you in one consolidated platform. So you have one area to control policies. You have one area to where you have visibility into where your users are going. So if you think about this as a left brain, right brain approach, the other side of that is going to be Zscaler Private Access. So these are going to be applications that you are either hosting in AWS, Azure, or you're hosting on-premise. And essentially, we're going to be taking some of those same actions that I talked about earlier, and we're going to be looking at who are you, right? Where are you going? Do you have authorization to access that application, to go to that destination? And somewhat differently, what we are doing is we're hiding these users and these applications behind our cloud infrastructure. So we are deploying virtual machines into the data center, into this infrastructure, and we are building an outbound connection to our cloud infrastructure where we are establishing that connection, right? And we are able to segment these different applications based off of, what are they, right? So you can have your sales applications in one bucket, you can have all of your developer applications in another bucket, and then you can further segment this down by user group attributes, right, that we're pulling in from your identity provider. And when we look at digital experience monitoring, this was really kind of spawned out of the need for organizations to have broader telemetry into network and application performance, right? I've talked with several customers who are getting IT help desk tickets, getting inundated with them. And this is really kind of a symptom of users' home network not being up to par, or maybe that there is an application that has downtime. I know a while back I was unable to access Salesforce, and our ZDX was able to identify that there was a Salesforce cloud outage, and therefore that is kind of the telemetry that you can receive. And really helping your IT help desk, with mean time to resolution for these different issues. And so when we think about, a holistic platform and essentially what Zscaler is providing, we're going to really lump this into 4 key buckets, right? Cyber threat protection, right? Everybody knows what's going on in the landscape. So Zscaler is able to provide advanced threat protection and give you, the organization and the practitioner, the ability to control what is your risk, like what sort of risk do you want to accept on the organization, right? And literally through a sliding bar, right, be able to differentiate that. We've seen where organizations are not allowing any new URLs or registered domains and blocking those outright. We've seen an increase in phishing attacks via emails. So being able, if a user, I'm a user, I know that I am the greatest risk to my organization. So inadvertently clicking, a link in an email, and Zscaler being able to block, right, us from going to that destination. Data protection. So CUI is king in this space, and where can CUI go, right? Who can have access to CUI? Preventing users from accidentally or purposely exfiltrating sensitive information. Zscaler is sitting truly in line between the user and its destination, and so we are able to block that traffic, right? Uploading SSL, or not SSL, social security numbers, PII, PHI, and then again CUI. And through using comprehensive DLP dictionaries, our dictionaries can be custom written via regular expressions, or even pulling in tags from Varonis or Microsoft to be able to write policies against that. You get a very comprehensive view of where your data is going, and being able to say where your data can go. So zero trust networking and risk management. So again, when we think about zero trust and least privileged access, we're really pushing that policy enforcement directly to the user and what the user has access to and where they can go. And through risk management, being able to give you a comprehensive landscape of where your data is, of where your users are, and where your users can go. And so again, just kind of summarizing this again. So I'll be the first to say that I am a huge fan of Zscaler, and I believe that Zscaler can do a lot, right? We're very comprehensive, but we're not an all-encompassing platform. Zscaler is going to stick to what we are good at, but we are going to leverage best-of-breed platforms to kind of help build that broader zero trust picture, if you will. And so again, breaking this down, we start with identity first. So SAML 2.0 is going to be our preferred authentication method. So we see a lot of Entra ID, Active Directory, and Okta are some key partners of ours, but we're starting with identity first. Right? And when you look at cloud infrastructure, Salesforce, ServiceNow, we have built out our infrastructure to have direct IP integrations with all of these providers, meaning that through a couple clicks of our platform and certain keys, we're able to integrate these solutions and to give you a broader picture, a broader picture of your infrastructure. And then endpoint security, this is, we're seeing this quite a bit. I will say that Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and SentinelOne are some of our key partners, but really, when I looked at, or when I mentioned the endpoint security part of this, looking at the posture profiles of the device, we're able to look at, is there the coexistence of one of these agents running, right? So when we look at CrowdStrike, for an example, first, is CrowdStrike running on the endpoint device? Okay, yes, great. The second thing we're going to look at is what is the threat score that we're bringing in from CrowdStrike? Meaning, hey, does this device fall beneath a certain threshold? If it does fall beneath a certain threshold, let's prevent the traffic from going to that destination in the first place. And if there's not the coexistence of this agent on the endpoint, well, the traffic isn't even going to go to its destination in the first place. So again, when we talk about zero trust from a Zscaler perspective, we know we're not all-encompassing, but a lot of these solutions we've seen, other organizations have them in place. And again, it paints the broader picture of what zero trust means. It is a framework. It requires multiple products. So when we look at Gartner and we look at transitioning to a more consolidated platform and framework, this is kind of where Zscaler can really help accelerate that process. And so we talked about the consolidation piece, but we're really able to eliminate different point products and provide these as one platform solution with a very predictable cost model over the course of the contract, right? We are a per user license model. We're not going to charge. We don't look at bandwidth. We don't look at device. We're looking at how many users do you have, right? Who needs to be protected? Again, pushing that policy enforcement to the user and the protections to the data. And so by being able to provide all of this functionality, we're really able to consolidate different offerings into Zscaler. And so again, just to kind of summarize, our mission is to secure, simplify, and transform your business. What I will leave you with is that Zscaler is a FedRAMP moderate and high JAB authorized platform. We have dedicated teams focused on our DoD, federal civilian, and obviously the defense industrial base, and folks that are extremely more knowledgeable than myself that are here to support you. We have a great customer base and folks that if you need to, we can get you aligned with who have implemented Zscaler successfully and have really found value there. So appreciate your time. Looks like I am right on time and you didn't have to stare at me. So thank you so much. Glad I had a slide presentation. I will be mingling about. One of my coworkers, Victor Franco, is also here. So feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're happy to support. Thank you.
Apparently they haven't turned the mic on yet. There it goes. So according to your schedule, I'm TBD. I learned a few hours ago that I'm Robert Hill and I'm going to be taking the next 15 minutes to talk to you. I'm the CEO of Cyturus. Some of you have heard of us, some of you haven't, but I'm going to take just a couple minutes to talk about Cyturus. And by the way, since I only learned about taking this speaking slot, I don't have a presentation, so you're just going to have to look at me as I stare back at you. But I want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about Cyturus, but I want to talk more about the ecosystem. I was talking to some of our peers, and last year, at this stage, at this event, I had a keynote talking about the why. And I've been asked to retell a story that I told last year, so I'm going to do that in a moment. But first, since they gave me the stage, I might as well talk about Cyturus for a moment. Cyturus is the designated platform by the CyberAB for the CMMC rollout. We support OSCs, we support RPOs, and we support the C3PAOs. Those of you that have been through the assessments, you've probably either used our platform or know about it. And so I want to talk just a couple minutes about the differences between what we offer into the industry and what you may have heard that is offered. One of the big differentiators that we talk about is your data. And so many times the GRC and GRC type platforms, they have to be concerned about your data because it's hosted within their tool. What happens if you put evidence? What happens if you put internal documents? What happens if that internal document happens to have some sort of data that you do not want outside your boundary, outside your scope? When we developed this product, and you've got to realize that we're practitioners. I've been a CISSP for more years than I want to remember. And as practitioners in this industry, we recognize that that is a problem. And so when we developed the tool, we made sure that we have a connector into your ecosystem, into your environment, whether it's GCC Hive with SharePoint, whether it's Dropbox, you select what that is, and we can connect that so that you never lose control of your data. It never leaves the boundaries of your environment. So it's always managed and controlled by you. Well, the next question is, what about an SSP? That's some sort of document that's out here that gets updated once in a while. Well, one of the things we've really seen a problem with is where those OSCs have a C3PAO come in and now their data or their control summary or their implementation solution or their scope has adjusted and changed and their SSP was never updated. So there's a disparity between the document that says how they're going to maintain this for the next 36 months and how they actually do it. That's a problem. So we invented and we patented a concept of a virtual SSP. That SSP never is generated until it's requested, until you have to turn it in, until it's needed by an auditor. And so it's bidirectional. As things change in your environment, as compliance updates, as risks change, as things in attestation and evidence are added, it automatically updates that SSP. But then there's this other concept where the SSP needs to not be developed by just technical folks because it's difficult to read and understand. So many times you have an editor or somebody that's editing that document, a technical writer that's going through it. So now all of a sudden you've got someone non-technical that's making changes to a document that is going to be your official story of how you're doing this. Well, that needs to also update the back end of your system. So it's bidirectional communication. So there's a few things about our platform. I'd love to spend some additional time talking about what we can offer, how we do this, but we have a booth. Come by, we can give you a demo, we can talk about the platform, we can talk about how you integrate compliance, maturity management, project management, risk register, policy management, QMS or quality management solution for document control management, which is required by AS 9100. Many of you in the aerospace industry understand that. And you have to manage over 500 documents from the time it's created to the time that it's replaced by something else. That's an integration. So you can add that integration as part of your compliance. So now your compliance, maturity management, project management, risk register. How about supply chain, third party, vendor risk management? How does that integrate with your compliance? How does that integrate with your risk register? How does that integrate with maturity management? It does within the platform. So you now have an integration of those tools. What about Incident Commander? What if you're looking at what incidents has a third party had? Again, you have those abilities, integrations. So again, please stop by our booth and we can talk about it. But I want to talk a little bit about CMMC. I want to take the next few minutes to talk about, we've spent years talking about when this is coming. There's been this massive ramp up and then nothing. And then more people ramp up and then nothing. And then 70-12 and then nothing. And now we finally have the ruling. We finally know what's coming. So we've talked about the when. We've talked about is it 110 controls or 320 objectives? There's all kinds of things we can discuss and talk about. But we miss the why. And last year we talked about the why, and I've been asked to repeat that story. So let's take hypothetically, again guys, this is hypothetical speaking. We're not going to pull something from reality, but I think you can interpolate from that. Let's talk about a client that has 5 users. That's it. The company, it's a small DIB, which you know the predominant number of DIB clients or customers are the SMBs. And this particular customer down in South Texas, they produce a gasket. That's it. They cut this little gasket, which goes to a supplier, to a supplier, to a supplier, to the manufacturer, and gets installed on an F-35, most advanced technical aircraft in the world. Well, until somebody lost their CUI and China copied it, but we won't go over that. That's part of the why. So now we look at this and we say, okay, what does that have to do? This little person, this 5-person company, well, they're complaining because they have to maintain the same level of CMMC that the manufacturer of the jet does. Lockheed, let's go down, Raytheon, we go down the list of these big government contractors. So people say it's not fair. Why do I, as a 5-person company, have to have the same level of security? Well, let's talk about that why. They make a gasket. They're so small that they really don't have a network. Their ISP is their cable company. Their cable modem is on coaxial. How many of us have, for the fun of it, in a hotel just kind of looked at the network to see who's out there on it? We all know how to do that. We've been in security for some of us over 30 years. We don't want to talk about how long. So this is the type of lack of security we're talking about in some of these. And I'm not blaming them. It's business. It's the cost of doing business. But an adversary, let's talk about China. Let's talk about any of the number of adversaries, APTs that we advanced persistent threats we can talk about. But let's talk about China. So they come in, they come through that router, they come through that dial-up modem, they come through that internet provided by that ASP, that small rural cable company. And they go to that one desktop that has a AutoCAD. And they go into that machine and they recognize that gasket, and there's an edge of it that's 31 millimeters. And they adjust that to 27 millimeters. Can you see that with your naked eye? No. I'm not going to mic that. We've cut 10,000 of them. Why would I assume that the next batch is going to be a 27 millimeter instead of 31 millimeter? No impact, no change. It still fits perfectly because the holes where it mounts are still there. Except a year down the road, that gasket has now been replaced as a preventive maintenance item into every F-35 globally, worldwide. A year later, one flames out. Pilot ejects, plane keeps flying, buries itself into the ground. Not enough left for us to even determine what happened to it. Except they do a full investigation. They realize it flamed out because that gasket burned through. It burned through because the engineers had designed it to be 31 millimeters. When that was reduced to 27, and the preventive maintenance cycle says that has to be replaced every 8 months, but it burns through in 3 or 4 months, we have a problem. You know what that problem is? They ground every F-35 in the world because that part has been used as preventive maintenance in our entire fleet. So now our adversary has specifically grounded and taken off the combat theater the most advanced tactical aircraft in the world, and they never fired a shot. That is why. We don't talk enough about what we do is supporting our troops, supporting this country, supporting those men and women that give us the freedoms that we appreciate and enjoy. But we look at this as overbearing. The government is forcing compliance. The government is forcing new regulation. The government is doing these things to us. It's not fair that we as a 5-person company have to maintain the same level of cybersecurity as does Lockheed, the producer of a multi-million-dollar jet. That is the why. We have to understand the criticality of what each of you do. The criticality of protecting. It's not that that gasket was a specific piece of classified information, but it's a part of a very sophisticated defense industrial base machine. And that 5-person company disrupted our effective capability in theaters around the world. That is the why. And many times we forget that. So we talk about, you heard me talk about legislation. You heard me talk about these types of things where we are being forced to do certain things, to meet certain requirements. Earlier this week, I received an email from a group that said, Representative Gary Palmer. Anybody recognize that name from this week, the news? House Resolution HJR 221. Anybody familiar? Somebody tell me. Oh, there's somebody. What is it? Revocation of CMMC as a bill introduced. You're absolutely correct. So on the surface, that looks like we have somebody playing politics with the security of our military. Something we have all worked on since 2012. Better than 10 years to get this to the point we're at. We're finally at the finish line, and all of a sudden here's some elected bureaucratic politician that's decided that that's not good for constituents in his district. Isn't that how you understand it? Isn't that what your thoughts are? I picked up the phone and called my representative, which happens to be Gary Palmer. I said, guess what, dude? I'll be in D.C. on Wednesday in your office. We're going to have a conversation. We sat down with the staff yesterday. We had a conversation. And we were all wrong. That has nothing to do with that bill. Yes, it does say CMMC in it. Do you know how the CMMC, we were finally able to get over that, get it into regulation, get it as December 15th? There's this little obscure rule that allows, if there's less than 60 days in the current congressional session, that they can authorize and push these through, and then the next session can revoke them, but it takes House, Senate, and President to do so. So what just happened is we had a legislative ruling become a regulation without representation. That is constitutionally illegal. So we now have a regulation that is causing that 5-person business to do all of this, the cost of doing business, we like to say, and their representative never voted on making that a law. That's Representative Palmer's problem. Historically, that ruling has been used 27 times previously. This fall, in this session, it was used over 40 times. 40 new regulations that were put into place without your legislative representation or a vote of people that you elected into the ability to. That's called, that is legislation or regulation without representation. Gary Palmer is not after CMMC. In fact, he's a big proponent of the DoD and of CMMC. We had a very long conversation about that. We're going to be doing some more work with them. What he did is they filed over 40 of that exact same legislation. Look up instead of 221, look up 220 and 222. You'll see that it's the exact same language. It's just a different bill that was passed through this process. It is bringing to the forefront to allow you to recognize what happened, not specifically CMMC. Is CMMC going to be repealed? Absolutely not. Are they going to? It'll never get out of subcommittee. It was not written to do that. It was written as part of a larger set of issues that I happen to support and agree with. I don't like having to have regulation without representation. I have a problem with that. So I agree with what they did. And I said, well, can you please just pull the 221 out because it's causing such a frustration for those of us that have been involved in this for a decade or more. Then he made a comment back. His staff wrote back and they said, if we pick and choose which ones of those we have a problem with, then we are part of the problem. We have to go after all of them to show that this is a problem. I couldn't argue with that. So there's a lot of rumors running around, and I wanted to take an opportunity to let you know that it is just rumor. It is not an excuse for an OSC to say, see, told you it wasn't going to happen. Glad we waited, didn't do anything about it. Guys, it's not another excuse to wait. It's happened. December 16th, you will recognize it's happened. So knowing what we know and having the backstory, I hope we can quelch some of those rumors. We can quelch some of those miscommunications that are happening within the industry. Some people call it misinformation. I have a problem with that term too. So as I wrap up, I wanted to take a moment to let you know that you're not alone. Look at the person beside you. Look at the person behind you. We're all in this together, from those of us that are RPOs, those that are C3PAOs, those that provide platforms like we do that help for the OSCs, for the RPOs, through that C3PAO, all the way to Microsoft, Richard Wakeman, making sure that GCC High is functional and passed, through Prevail and the things that they're doing, through the C3PAOs like Redspan and what they're doing. We are in this to support you, the OSCs. We're in this to support you, the RPOs, whose clients are the OSCs. We're here to support the C3PAOs to ensure that the DoD and the DIB has effectively solved for national security issues. And now we understand why we're doing that. And we understand the representatives and what's happening at the Capitol and what we're doing about it. So guys, they gave me 15 minutes. I only found out about it a few minutes ago, but that's okay. We covered the full 15 minutes. I got 5 seconds left, so I wanted to say thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we're down here in the booth beside Carosoft. If there's anything that we can do, or you want a demo of the platform and how we can support you and your clients, please let us know. My name is Robert Hill. Thank you for your time.